I didn't recommend locking anything down. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. First of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down.
I didn't recommend locking anything down. I didn't recommend locking anything down.
I didn't recommend locking anything down. I recommended to the president that we shut the country down.
With another lovely episode of Broken Truth, this is John Davidson, and today we have the incredibly talented Jason Fick with us, who is, are you president, CEO of Social Media Freedom Foundation?
Founder,
sure. Great.
Yeah.
So Jason's going to tell us a little bit about his case against Facebook. He's been in this social media fight for a lot longer than most of us COVID newbies have. And we're going to find out a little bit more about what you can do to help prep your own case against the government, tech companies, and whoever else has harmed you. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Jason, can you give me top line background on your Facebook case and
sure
how you got here?
How I got here. So I got involved in Facebook early on, like very early on, 2010, 2011-ish. And in 2011, I started going, building pages aggressively, more aggressively than most everybody out there. I learned the engagement model very quickly. I learned how to essentially not game the algorithm, but work with it at the time, because the algorithms at Facebook were very much the way they are at TikTok right now. Meritocracy, if you produce good content, you get people. Well, long and the short of it is, I built an audience that was gigantic. Cumulatively between my pages in 2012, I think BuzzFeed had 9.7 million. I had like 12.8. And then by the end of 2012, I had 16.9. And then somewhere, it ballooned up. I think at our peak, we estimated about 38 million fans on Facebook. But somewhere along the way, and it was about a decade ago, it was the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, I believe, Facebook got involved heavily. I mean, they were already involved with the government. The whole perception that they're a separate entity working independently is no. Facebook and government are almost one and the same thing. It goes all the way back. But about a dozen years ago, there was a plan that was moved into place, which was to make these companies leviathans. I mean, basically, they're monopolies, but they're not. And what I mean by that is that they turned their business model from that of a platform into a content provider, right? They just started deciding who are the winners and losers of content. And the problem that has persisted from that point on is their advertising business model meant that they were taking money from some content providers and to promote their content in the same newsfeed that they had offered everybody organic reach for free. So effectively, they put themselves as a direct competitor of every single user. Now, that should have been exposing them to antitrust liability, but for Section 230. Section 230 being the law that protects them. Well, for the longest time, they basically stole everything that everybody built for themselves. It's effectively like where you see TikTok right now is everybody built their audience and the government took it away. Well, that's basically what happened to me is the government in partnership with Facebook took it away because the government's protecting Facebook and they're protecting the rest of big tech. And why? Because they're trying to centralize information control. That's all that social media is effectively, is the government sees it as a way to control information. Now, they weren't quite prepared for the power of social media because social media has basically nullified all mainstream media. Legacy media is dead. Nobody cares. We are the news. That's the battle cry now, but they can't even have that. That's why there's such a big mess. Well, 2016, they took down 6 of my pages and I caught them in a complete lie. They took them down and of course they would argue that it was because they didn't like the content, right? Well, about 4 months later, I went to a friend of mine, but a competitor now. I mean, he was just like me, but he did a lot more advertising with Facebook. I'm like 22 million, I think. And Facebook reps worked with him, and he went to Facebook and he asked if they could reinstate my pages that they had taken down, these 6 pages, and they destroyed all the rest of them. And destroyed my business all one shot, right? Well, Facebook said we can restore them, but only if you own the pages, meaning my competitor owns it. So I had no choice. I was sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It was worth nothing in one case, or I could transfer to this other company. Well, I transferred it, and sure enough, days after the contracts were inked, all my pages came back up. Which means no matter what I had posted, because everybody says, well, you must have had bad stuff. No. They lie about everything. They wipe you out for whatever reason they want, and they say you violated one or all of our rules. Well, I proved that the content had absolutely nothing to do with taking me down, because the same content that was taken down was put back up for another owner. All that mattered is who had it. That's it. Well, that same anti-competitive model, right? Which is, and I know a lot of this says that your field is the COVID thing, but I want everybody to understand the translation here. Anti-competitive conduct that is inherently built into their algorithms, right? They decide what stays up and what gets taken down, is the same mechanisms they use for censorship with regards to COVID misinformation. Same model, same thing. They just decide what is and is not allowed. Well, that's what, I mean, we all know it. That's what a publisher does, right? And then you get in that argument, are they a publisher or are they a platform? Well, yes, they're a publisher. And the thing is, they say, well, they can act as a publisher, and that's because of Section 230. And the thing about Section 230 is that's how these companies have been getting away with the misinformation, which of course is catastrophic. They controlled life-saving health information. People took the jab that didn't need to take it, that thought that they were going to die if they didn't wear a mask, that was completely useless. I mean, it was bizarre. You know, you lived it, I lived it, but some people weren't, astute enough, or maybe not paying attention. They had to look through the, what do they say? Be able to see the forest for the trees. You have to be able to look through that misinformation that they were dumping on us, right? And the thing is that this entire time we could have stopped it. But this is where it starts to come, you realize that our government is necrotic. It's already gone. Now the question is, what do we do about it? And the reason I say that is because in 2000, I caught him in 2016. I managed to get a lawyer, because it is, again, I remember the space we were last like. It is difficult to get a lawyer that will go after a monster, because they don't want to mess up status quo, ever. And I got a lawyer that had, the wherewithal to take this on, and we went after Facebook. And you know what? Section 230 comes into it, and they said, in my case, they said everything that Facebook did, all of the illegal conduct that didn't even occur on the internet, they had backroom deals. All of that was protected under C1, which is 230C1 of the Communications Decency Act, by itself. And then when we even argue, yeah, but they have to be good Samaritans. It says it right there in the law in quotes. And they said, no, that doesn't apply either. So what that meant was, in my case, and this is where everything is starting to fall apart for them, because I never gave up. Like, I have been in a war with these guys, right? Because they said, well, they're a private company. They can do whatever they want. No private entity or public entity is able to restrain your individual civil liberties without legal remedy. If you hold me down, put a gun to the back of my head and pull the trigger, you don't just walk away, do you? No. You've restrained my individual liberties, which in that case would be my life, but we can sue. Well, here I am suing, and they say, no, they can do anything they want to you, and the congressional intent doesn't matter. Well, you know what that is? That's a denial of due process. That is a violation of our rights. And they have been doing it for 2.5 decades because the courts won't fix it. So that got me thinking, well, why are the courts so obstinate? I've been to the Supreme Court twice with the resolution to the entire internet problem. The whole COVID misinformation, censorship, industrial complex move that they did in 2021 would not have occurred had the Supreme Court taken my case. It's that important. It catastrophic damage in delaying my decision, right? Mm-hmm. The point is that if they're going to control all this information and there's no restraint, and the Supreme Court won't take it, and the Ninth Circuit, they won't do it. How? Because I hit a blockade. I was like, how do I fix this then? And this is actually, you know what? This is the first time I've ever actually said this on the show, but I'm going to explain a higher level strategy that I had to engage in, right? Mm-hmm. I knew that my courts in California were done. They just are. I mean, it's horrendous what I'm dealing with, right?
Yeah.
How do I get the right scenario to get this fixed? And I realize what I need to do is go public about all of the information, and other lawyers worth their salt are going to look at case law and so forth. Well, sure enough, a Berkeley professor read all of our current briefs. He first called with me, Mr. Fick. Oh, I've read all of your briefs. And then he came to the conclusion that Section 230 needs to be applied as written, which is like the fundamental way you apply a law, as it's written, right? So he writes a treatise, which is a big, long legal explanation about how Section 230 works. And sure enough, the Fourth Circuit relies on it in a case called Henderson versus Public Data, and they get it right. They finally start to undo it. And then another case, Anderson versus TikTok in the Third Circuit, they got it right, relying on the same treatise. Why? Because in that circumstance, they recognize that they can be treated as a publisher when they act as a publisher. They cannot be treated as the publisher or speaker. There's a definite article change there. It's very subtle. It's nuanced. But at the same time, in the TikTok case, they recognized there was a difference between treating the TikTok as the one who created the blackout challenge, right? And they had argued, well, that got people killed, and the court recognized that the plaintiff was not trying to treat the defendant as that defendant who as the creator of the TikTok challenge, but for their own recommendation of something that was that dangerous. That's their own conduct. They got it right. But the problem, we still couldn't get the courts to get to the 230C1 issue of the text. That happened December 19th. Now, this is something that almost nobody in the world knows. December 19th, the Fifth Circuit, in a case called AB versus Salesforce, finally did the textual analysis my courts wouldn't do after 6 years of litigation and 2.5, we're on our third trip to the Supreme Court now. They wouldn't do it. Well, textual analysis says we were right. Ever since day one, 6 years ago, we were right. So people have died as a direct result of the court's delay in my case. That should anger a lot of the people who follow your information.
Who are the judges in these cases?
Well, I started out in district court under Judge White. And Judge White, 5 years into the case, voluntarily recused himself.
In California?
In California. And get this, ready for this one? It turns out he had millions in tech stock. And he's rendering decisions that would have affected the stock value of those stocks. That alone is enough to call into question the entire integrity of the court, the decision, and everything. He advanced facts that weren't from the defendant that were completely untrue. They said I had pages dedicated to urination, right? Facebook lied. I didn't, not even close. But the judge dumped that in the thing, which shows his bias again. And then the Ninth Circuit did absolutely nothing to fix this. We even filed what's called a constitutional challenge, which is a legal fail-safe. That is, when you are denied your right, you can file a separate and independent action, right? That's how it has to be filed, to challenge the constitutionality of the law as applied in my case. And I did that. And then and I kid you not, this is how bad it is in the courts right now. There's a whole section that says a constitutional challenge is non-forfeitable. Makes sense, right? Constitutional right. You don't get the court doesn't go, nah, you don't get to do that. Yes, I do. I get to challenge it, right?
Yeah.
What they did, they terminated it as, quote, freestanding. Doesn't freestanding mean separate and independent action? Because in the next sentence, they argued that I needed to bring it as a separate and independent action. It's a circular argument. And you're going, what is going on here? I mean, it legitimately is that bad. They don't care. They're not fixing it. So we are headed back to the Supreme Court now, and I'll sort of land my plane here. We're headed back to the Supreme Court for the third time. Mm-hmm. This entire thing, everything we're watching to trying to understand this, people, it is an information war, and you're all cattle. They don't care about you. Your government is the biggest problem. This whole TikTok ban, it doesn't have to do with CCP. No, the reality is that TikTok allowed Trump to win. It helped him. Why? Because it is actually a semi-free speech platform. They don't take down much. All they cared about was growing. And that is the scariest thing to this government, is they don't want anybody to know about what they're doing. And in part, that's keeping what they did to everybody that was harmed by COVID. They don't want anybody to know that they were actually behind it, but that's also what we're working on. So
I will say this, that TikTok does have some Obama plants in there that have been taking down things.
It's possible.
Took down something that I posted from a doctor yesterday.
So it's not to say that they don't have plans and so forth, but they can't control the information the way they do with U.S. companies right now. They're not working as extensions of big tech. They're basically integrated with them.
Yeah.
I mean, they have backdoor access. I mean, the information war is incredibly big right now.
Yeah. The person I'm talking about is a woman named Victoria McCullough, who was an assistant at the White House. She is over at, I don't know if she's still at TikTok now, but she was in charge of, I think, community and safety. And she was also a component of a group called Public Good Projects, which I think Lee Fang, Matt Taibbi, those guys have covered a bit. And they have been doing a lot of the online censorship through Facebook. They were like the militant wing of a nonprofit organization, partially funded by pharmaceutical lobbyists, to take down anything that said, hey, the vaccines might not be the best thing ever, or hey, look, here's an alternative treatment that would negate the EUA. This is all orchestrated to take away your rights. And I think what you're doing is great. I want to, before we go too much farther, I want to share with our viewers your website, Social Media Freedom Foundation. And again, you can get that at socialmediafreedom.org. And what's, I think, very important is if you go to documents, you can see all of your court cases.
I would go to the last one, Bollinger versus Censorship Industrial Complex. I think that one will be pertinent to everybody that you're involved with, because this is probably the most important First Amendment case in modern history. Mm-hmm. It's not talked about. And the reason it's not talked about is if you just look right there at the defendants, look at the list of defendants. Look who we're going after. Department
of State Global Engagement Center. That's GEC, which was just defunded, right? Theoretically.
Yep. Well, yes, it was defunded, but then the 51 members are being moved to a different division of government.
Right.
Now, they should be fired, period.
Right.
Go ahead.
Department of Homeland Security, CISA, FBI, HHS. Yeah, you can keep going. But
Media Matters, Facebook, Google, Twitter, X. Why? Because that's your censorship industrial complex. Remember, Missouri versus Biden missed something. They went after Biden. Biden's only temporary. This right here represents the actual censorship industrial complex. It goes out further. We didn't name individual people yet, but for now, we're going after the monster. And you know what? It's a 282-page complaint. We explain exactly how the government set itself up to be able to control information and how they infiltrated and controlled these big tech companies during the entire COVID epidemic, because the epidemic wasn't so much COVID as it was just control of information. It was misinformation being dumped from the United States government. I mean, they were stopping true information. I mean, it was, if you read it, it's like, wow, it's a mind blower what they did. It gets really, really bad.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. My hope is that things are going to have a turnaround soon. You're seeing some, hint of sanity returning slightly. I don't know if it's enough, but let's see what happens in a week. I'm not necessarily putting all my hopes in one man, but maybe the team that he has a plan to work on some of this stuff, because
I hope
if it's not the case, it's just a different version of the same mess.
I think you can pretty much agree with me on this one. If we do not gut this problem, burn it out of the government in the next 4 years, the United States is falling. We are already there. But if he doesn't surround him, the fact that he's got Mark Zuckerberg chumming up with him and Bezos and now Bill Gates. And I mean, that should anger everybody. And it's not to say that, you do bring your enemies closer, they say, right?
Sure.
And you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's smart enough to know what he's doing to bring in those people. Right. But who knows? Maybe he's not going to go after the right things. I don't know. We'll have to just ride along and see.
A lot of folks in this movement don't think about the strategy, and they're angry if not everyone immediately runs into the line of fire of tanks. And I get it. I tried it. It didn't work. So the other ways you have to do it are with strategy, and that means an understanding of the courts and which courts are more favorable to which decisions, and which judges have made decisions that are more favorable, which judges are willing to step outside of case law to render rulings that may put them under the crosshairs. I mean, the case against CNN's defamation was really interesting this week. The judge there, that guy was not having any of it that was coming out of CNN, and they got $5 million from CNN for what they did. Now, CNN, I mean, defamation with malice is pretty huge. Did you ever look into one thing that you said stuck out to me? You said that Facebook said you did a urination page, which, considering the manure that you see on Facebook, I don't know why that matters, but whatever the case. And then the average person would say to you, "Oh, well, you must have put something up bad."
And that's the general reaction of society, except for the fact that what we are now training people to understand is everything they say is a lie. Everything. Just assume it's a lie first, and then try to prove that it is actually, in fact, true. That's the only way you got to look at power.
Did you ever look into a defamation case?
If it's said in the context of a lawsuit, it doesn't work because it's part of the lawsuit. They didn't say it publicly. They said it in a public record in a suit that I had paid you. And I mean, I can explain it very easily. I digitally, I cut and paste a group of URLs out of a contract. One page that I grabbed wasn't mine. It was accidental because URLs are different than the names of the pages. I grabbed the URL and I stuck it in the complaint, and the URL read facebook.com/takeapissfunny.
Well, that's where they got it.
It was owned by a UK guy, and take a piss is not what you think. It actually means to poke fun of or make fun of something, and that's why it had the word funny on the end. It was a meme page. And they lied and said it was a page dedicated to urination public when they could have easily looked at it and said, Jason Fick doesn't even own it. So it's wrong.
That's actually kind of funny.
But then the judge echoed it forward, and then I became the piss guy by all of the guys who are trying to protect big tech, when the reality is, I mean, I've even offered against those guys to debate publicly. You know what they say? No, it's against our brand. No, it's because I'm not even a lawyer, and I'll smoke you, and you're the dean of a law school. I'll smoke you in an argument. It's just fun to mess with these people because they know I'm right, but they right. just got to keep everybody in the dark so that the public doesn't understand what's going on. We're kind of winning the big tech war, believe it or not.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
You're not an attorney, are you?
No. I mean,
at this point, you should have an honorary.
Teach attorneys now I became what you would be considered a legal expert in a nuanced law, which is how Section 230 applies. My attorney became my partner in the case of Brighteon and also the Bollinger case, which is they were members of the Disinformation Dozen. And essentially, I almost work in the, I work as an expert in all of this stuff because I've done it for years now. You do something long enough, you eventually become an expert in it.
Yeah. We're all educated now in sort of a polymath
by
kind
choice,
of way.
By necessity,
But I was talking to an attorney yesterday about just the court system and the filing of briefs and appeals and replies and all this stuff. And I asked him, I was like, is this system of our judiciary function, is this how the founding fathers envisioned it? That you would spend, that when you had to redress your grievances against another or the government, that it would take years of paperwork before you would ever have your day in court? And he goes, no, of course not. He goes, back in the day, Abraham Lincoln and those guys would just travel around. And then, I had a traveling court that would go to all the different towns in Illinois. And he would be in court every week. Now when you talk to, even the good lawyers, I would say, or maybe the braver lawyers who are willing to stick their necks out, they don't want to go to court. That's the last thing they do. We've created a system of judiciary or the justice system that is designed to deny court cases.
Make as much money as fast as you possibly can without doing as little as you possibly can. That's kind of the way they function at this point. And actually, an interesting little fact, because you were talking about Abe Lincoln, Ben Franklin, right? So this is right after the Revolutionary War. Do you think Ben Franklin was beholden to the British? So was he part of the bar? British accreditation? No, but he was a lawyer.
Right.
You know where it comes from? It's law sayer. Was lawyer. There was no British accreditation. There was no bar, and that only transpired down the road as they got into statutory law and everything else like that. And the reality is that makes you an attorney. So theoretically, I could say I'm kind of an attorney. Oh, you see me I almost messed that up. Kind of a lawyer.
Right. I mean, anyone could be a lawyer.
Yeah,
back then,
a law sayer.
Which, when you really think about it, it's like, why have we allowed a third party organization, the British American Association, Bar Association, why have we allowed that entity to come in and take away our rights of self-representation or standard representation? If you show up in a court right now trying to represent someone else, calling yourself a lawyer without a bar license, what happens?
You get thrown out. I can understand maybe not representing another person, but that's why
that's what Lincoln did.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess. I mean, the thing is that it's knowing the procedures and laws and so forth. I mean, I don't have a bar license, but I know most of statutory procedure and law. I actually know common law. Do you know that lawyers aren't taught common law anymore, like basic law? And when I say common law, what I mean is that a person in their own sovereignty can come into. But the problem is that judges don't even understand this now. So, like, if you come in there and say that I'm looking for remedy by necessity, what that means is I have my sovereign rights. I actually I have more authority than you do, Judge. I demand you to do what I'm asking you to do because I'm looking for legal remedy. That's what it means. And back in the day, that actually happened. Probably because they would shoot the guy if he didn't do it. But nowadays, they don't care. They don't care what you do. They will deny you on the most insidious reasons. And the problem is because the courts have been completely corrupted. They're as bad as Congress, or as bad as the Biden presidency. It's bad.
There are so many things that I want to see corrected in Congress, term limits. I also want to see a re-review of previous laws, right? So there should be expirations, like, so that if they pass a law that takes away a right, that law has to be re-reviewed within 5 years. Like, that should be mandatory, because otherwise you're going to enter into a situation like the Patriot Act, whatever, that takes away rights forever. And granted, that one still needs to be re-upped every few years. So I can't say that solution fixes anything, but we need to reevaluate how justice and law is delivered in this country, because it seems like we've allowed third parties to come in and hijack everything. Medical licenses, the bar, the method of case law dictating what judges are comfortable doing. Sometimes you got to throw out the trash so that you can start from scratch. And it's an interesting conversation that we're having, because I don't think many attorneys would be comfortable having it.
No, because most attorneys, their entire future,
they're part of the system.
They're exactly that. They bought into the system. They spend a lot of money to stay in that system, so they operate in that system. And I don't care. I want to actually fix the problem.
Medical doctors, similar thing. Once you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in your youth, you're now in debt forever. The last thing you're going to do is do something that risks your medical license.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of the doctors were were pushed into these COVID things is
Yeah.
it was either money or because they just didn't want to push back against the system. But the problem is, you know, the question is, when does it become enough oppression that people act?
Yeah.
And some people are more, adverse to the situation. Like me, leave me alone. I want the government to just leave me alone. But it is what it is.
So, last night we were in a space with the COVID humanity. Actually, I'm not going to try to say the name. Go to betrayalproject.org. They made a new URL to spare me the agony of always getting the original name wrong.
Perfect.
Betrayalmemory.org. And that's or is it betrayalproject.org? I think that's it.
I heard it like once.
Hang on, I'm gonna tell you because I don't want to get it wrong. Betrayal.
Yeah, we got to be right about these. The accuracy matters. Might be Betrayal Project.
I think it's Betrayal Project.
And the funny thing is we were also talking about whether lawyers were taking. I think my lawyer would take their cases, but there's also no money out there. Like they can't be taken on contingency because they're some of the biggest fights in the world. These are not simple wins. These are huge enemies you fight. So that's another problem.
Yeah, it is betrayalproject.org. And it leads you to the COVID-19 Humanity Betrayal Memory Project, chbmp.org. But you could just type in betrayalproject.org. That's a cruel name for people suffering from brain fog. That's
it's like covidbad.com. There you go.
Yeah. Let's break it really simple. But
real simple.
One of the things we talked about last night is people were like, what can I do? How can I get ready for this fight? Like, I can't get lawyers, I can't get attorneys or anyone to help me. And, the thing I said that you kind of backed me up on was build a timeline of events, right? Know your case front and back so that if and when you do get a lawyer, you have all of your evidence laid out, provable. And what this person responded was kind of shocking to me. She's like, well, I don't know how to do a Google Sheet or an Apple Numbers grid or an Excel grid or whatever. What are you talking about? Which that's a whole other.
Write it down.
There's that, right? Write it down.
Write it down. Like, that's it. You don't have to do a Google Sheet. Just write it down just so that you can regurgitate it when they need it, and especially when you get to court.
But for those who are able to create a sheet, I'm just going to show you really simply, really quickly, how to do this so that you're not completely caught off guard. This is an Apple Numbers grid. It's the same thing that you'll get if you create a new sheet in Google Sheets, which comes with, if you go into Google, you can click the apps and there's Google Sheets. If you have a Gmail account, you already have access to this, but it's all essentially the same thing. You create a new document, it looks blank, and you just name it and timeline of events. And let's just say this is a person who was mistreated in a hospital system. So you can say first symptoms. Actually, do the date first. We'll just say 1/1/25. First symptoms.
Yep.
And then 1/2/25. Contacted doctor.
First day might be when I got the vaccine.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of these people were not. So you have different groups within this system. You have people who didn't get the vaccine that went to the hospitals, were mistreated and killed or maimed or injured. And then you had people who were vaccine injured who were then mistreated by their symptoms being ignored or denied. Some of these people even went to the FDA, like Brianne Dressen, and the FDA did nothing, right? Like they brought them in and they said, oh, we can help maybe treat this with IVIG, and then they vanished. And I have recordings of the FDA members on the call, including Peter Marks, which, this is not something that is fabricated. The FDA knew very early that there were issues, and they employed this fascist censorship system to silence anyone. That's the real shame. While they had victims they were dealing with, the other hand was covering their mouths.
Yes. That is exactly what it is. The government knew that this was dangerous. They knew that they were working with big tech to silence any alternatives, and as a result, people were injured or died. And I mean, it's not really a complex model. They did, and the question then becomes, and which I think is ultimately going to be the case, is I think the government is in bed with big pharma, and that's what really drove this. It was a wealth exchange.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to be unpacking this for 20 years if we can survive this. So just to explain to people a little more, you would do a fake URL.com if you have evidence of something, or public official states it's safe. Fake URL. Put the URL. Yeah. So the goal is, guys, do this thing. List out important details. If you have medical records, then your evidence, date, description, evidence, right? Anything else you think I need to put in there? I mean, maybe if you want to have sort of a keyword search topic.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is a preservation of events and evidence. So the other thing, too, is that I would suggest that if it is an image that is on a website and you're grabbing the URL, do not just grab the URL, grab a screenshot of it, back it up. Make sure that information doesn't disappear. Like, for example, we were fighting, with the CCDH. Well, CCDH has since shut its X account down. So all of the stuff that was originally available is no longer available through link, but of course, we got into backing it up before it occurred. So now they're still obligated to preserve evidence, but, we know that doesn't necessarily always happen.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's the biggest thing is that you want to make sure that everything that you just, and keep it as a running timeline. I would go back to anything that is peripheral to it, anything that would lay into it, anything that is not just evidentiary, but maybe there's other people that were injured, maybe connect. Like you really want everything, because when and if you get an attorney, they don't know your story. And I'm sitting here. I mean, we only met last night, and I don't profess to even remotely understand the harms that COVID and the vaccines and the hospitals and so forth. I don't know. I don't know the drugs involved. Because that's not what I have worked on. What I've worked on is trying to get the freedom of information to get back out to the public, so that, I mean, for one thing, all the people that are now being silenced and suppressed because they were harmed, well, it helps that people know. And that right there is the biggest problem we have, is the control of information. So it's my fight helps everyone, but I don't profess to know the specifics. But as far as legally speaking, that's the biggest thing. That's how we determined that the government actually was complicit with Facebook. Facebook wasn't a patsy here where they were pressured into it. They're not victims. They have been complicit with the government for almost a decade. They're intertwined. There's almost no difference between the two. The only difference being, and I think this is a really poignant thing, is as all of this was coming about, right, 2021, 2022, Facebook warned the United States White House, right, the Biden administration, warned them that too much censorship might expose a cover-up.
You have that as an email?
Yeah. Since when does a victim warn its captor of potentially getting caught?
Was that released as part of Facebook files?
It was in the discovery, I believe, on Missouri versus Biden, or in the release of the Facebook files. Yeah. Yeah,
we should definitely look into that discovery, because that's huge. Mm-hmm. Facebook, my feeling is, if you look at Mark Zuckerberg's folksy effort to say, so, we were being censored, you guys, gee whiz.
Sorry,
what could
we almost
do?
killed everybody.
We didn't.
Our bad.
We didn't have any lawyers. When you see that video of Zuckerberg sitting in a kitchen or whatever telling you this story, understand that is the most well-crafted fakery I've ever seen. That cat read everything perfectly from a teleprompter.
True.
He knew exactly what to say. His lawyers had to the letter spelled out everything he could and could not say.
Yeah, I'm sure the government was involved in that.
Probably so, yeah.
I mean, you have to understand what controlled opposition is. Controlled opposition is that when the government's still involved and they realize they've been caught, now they have to accept the fact that they've been caught. And I mean, we've seen this repeated cycle.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Okay, it is happening, but it's a good thing. Okay, it did happen, was a bad thing. We're sorry. We'll try not to do it again. It's literally repeating itself, and it's like, no, these people belong in jail. They did this on purpose. People died. Like, end of story.
Not just death, but I mean, this
yeah.
is devastated an entire generation of children.
Yes.
That the ramifications of that will echo through history. Hopefully, if enough of us can tell these stories, and this is why I kind of got in a bit of a rant last night. People come to me and they say, "Hey, we want you to tell our documentary." People understand that there is a need for the expression of their stories because it's been suppressed to the point that people don't even think it happened. We have an entire nation that's been gaslit.
Yes.
And they're very angry. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to do is diffuse that, frankly, by telling their stories, by re-educating the average person to understand that, you know what, you're a sheep and you need to learn how to smell wolf. And I want to show you what it smells like. And these are the stories. I mean, you know, the hospital injured, the vaccine injured, the lawyers that spoke out and were crushed, the doctors that spoke out and were crushed. We need 1,000 Aaron Brockovich style movies. We can't just do documentaries. And the problem is that the people in this, you know, whether they're conservatives or I don't really even know, it's not left or right. It's more, you know, up and down, good and evil, right? The people that could fund this don't. And the people that have the money are the networks. Therefore, we have to engage with the networks and the studios while they still have money because they're on a downward trajectory right now because people are also sick of it, of being lied to and, you know, having the truth covered up. But I want to tell these stories, but I have to engage with my old clients and my old friends. I'm happy to do it. I think we've had enough evidence. Almost everybody knows someone's been injured by these shots. Yep. If they may not realize it, but they do. Yeah. So that's a conversation I want to have. So I'm going to shamelessly plug. Please go to my website, Epidemic of Fraud. You can watch the movie there. It covers the hydroxychloroquine media scandal. But what I really want you to do after you donate $10 million to the cause is sorry, yeah, or $10.
I love
actually.
This. The shameless one. I mean, yeah. Hey, if you got $10 million, why not throw another 5 my way?
Right. You know, I mean, look, money bags. You can't take it with you.
Yeah.
But you go to my website, right? You're like, this is a shameless plug, right? But up here to the right, there's something called Take Action. Now I want to make sure you can see this website.
I can.
So if you go to click Take Action at the top, it takes you all the way down here to Take Action Today. And if you click this, send an email to the networks and studios, you're going to create a new email. And that email is going to be, and I'm not going to,
Not going to show me?
Yeah, no, I have to hide my email address first.
Good.
Let me.
Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to have to edit this later. So let me replace screen sharing with a window.
Old school way, you just put your thumb in front of the screen.
Yeah. So if you click that button, it immediately crafts this email that goes to NBC Universal, ABC, CBS, Fox, Sony Pictures, Peacock, Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, Netflix. You know, all of the studios that are producing content will get this. And that's what you want, right? So, you know, it basically says you've omitted important information the last 5 years. This is for your programming department. Please watch this movie and contact this director to schedule negotiations to tell the stories that you have omitted for the past 5 years. I say the word omitted with intent because error and omissions insurance is something that every producer has, and they've omitted a huge component of what's happened in our country. So that's my shameless plug. Forgive me. But this is free. You just click a damn button and make your voice heard. I can't go to the table with Warner Brothers or Disney without a lot of people saying, "Hey, we want to do this. We want you to hear us." If I get there, I mean, I would be thrilled to be able to sit there and say, "Look, these are real people. Every single person that you said was a liar or a misinformation spreader was trying to get their voices heard, and you essentially." Per quad defamed them by associating them with misinformation. The future is not looking good because juries, if we can ever get to jury trials in these cases, are turning for all the reasons that I just said. So let's I think if you're liable for some really bad stuff as a big organization, a smart move, as Zuckerberg just demonstrated, is to get ahead of the punishment and show that when you realize there was a problem, try to do something to correct it, to allow more diversity in ideology. That's what we really need. I mean, that's what's been lost in this country. So I think, just to remind everybody again, because I have to, go to epidemicofraud.com. Sign the button. And while you're also on the internet being observed by our overlords, don't forget to go to Social Media Freedom Foundation, run by the lovely and talented Jason Fick. I love to say that, especially when I'm on an interview with guys.
Yeah.
So
I'd like calling a guy beautiful instead of handsome. It's like, okay.
Hey, you know what? Beauty is a curse. I live with it every day.
And a false sense of self, but
yes, and my incredible humility.
Yes.
But anyway, Jason, what's next for you?
Next is Supreme Court, third time. It's funny because you sit there and say, okay, well, how do I explain this to everybody? Well, let me make it really simple. I am going to hand the Supreme Court the fix to the entire internet censorship problem for the third time. I'm going to give it to them with a bow on it, and it's indisputable. And I mean, we know our argument is indisputable because they won't let me into a hearing. They won't let me amend. They won't let me do anything in the courts right now. And the Supreme Court will have a choice. All I can do is cross my fingers and hope that somehow they see the light, because any other case, although they're, it's unfortunate because one of the concerns is they try to take cases that are like flashy. Ooh, child sex trafficking case. Like the Gonzalez versus Google, they brought it up there for 230 and then they couldn't fix 230 because it really wasn't the right case. A straight up financial case is the easiest way to deal with the law because it's very simple. Antitrust, right? Which is very simple. If they're acting as a dominant party in partnership with my straight line competitor to be able to push me out of business, can't do that. That's tortious interference. It's real simple. It's a legal duty that the companies have. Their terms of service doesn't negate it. None of that negates it, but it has so far. But that's coming to an end because the other courts that are a little more concerned than California have finally come up and said, nope. So we have the perfect storm now for the Supreme Court to fix this, because not only do I have the solution, very simple, apply the law as written. That's literally what we're asking them to do, specifically as written. We've identified the grammatical mistake that they made and what changed all the context. It's like whisper. The best way to explain what happened is whisper down the lane occurred over the past 2.5 decades. They took case law and precedent, and they misread it, and it got misread, and it got morphed into something else. Well, here we are. We now have 3 circuits in contradiction to the California courts in my case. We have an intra-circuit conflict. Now, this is what's even more bizarre is there are 4 cases in the Ninth Circuit that actually agree with me, and they found procedural ways to ignore them. all of them. So they won't even fix it with an intra-circuit conflict. They have multiple district. I have about 12 or 14 district splits that they won't sort that out either. I have a constitutional challenge that was ignored. So a constitutional deprivation of rights coming. So I have a constitutional deprivation, tons of circuit splits. I have the solution for them. And the reality is that the delay that they have done in the past years has ultimately resulted in the destruction of free speech, almost the destruction of the constitutional republic, and the death of many, many, many people. There is no better storm than that. It's like, do the job, Supreme Court. Here it is.
Have you ever heard about clerks of the court getting in the way of cases actually reaching the justices for review?
Yeah. I only think that might have actually happened in ours. Believe it or not, we actually brought that up in the Ninth Circuit Court.
Really?
Yeah. We think that the clerks are intercepting them.
I had an interview with a guy named Greg Stenstrom, also, I think, in Pennsylvania. Do you know him?
Yeah, familiar with him, yes.
So Greg...
We cited him.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, in the Bollinger case.
Greg is another non-attorney litigant who's doing a lot of his own pro se suits, and he noticed this unusual clerk, I think, in the Supreme Court that may or may not allegedly be curiously involved in cases that don't make it to the justices.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Review, they'll never get taken.
I think that there are ways to petition, say, specific judges. Maybe Clarence Thomas. I am way out on a limb here, but I know that there are some ways that people have tried to get things addressed to specific justices.
We have let me just put it this way. I can't explain how or why. We have a workaround this time.
Okay, great. Hey,
we are not going to get caught on that one again.
I grew up close to where Honey Boo Boo, the show on TLC, is from. Oh boy. Also close to Sandersville, which is where Clarence Thomas is from. Yeah. So maybe play the Honey Boo Boo card.
Well, once it becomes public record, there are people that are friends with them, and there is nothing wrong with them saying, "Hey, have you seen this case?" That the same case that he has legitimately been looking for the entire time I have gone to the Supreme Court twice. Now I'm bringing it back a third time, and it's like, well, if the clerks are intercepting this, talk about the biggest scandal in history if it turns out that the Supreme Court justices do find it, and then they find out that they were never actually notified of the cases that I brought before that could have saved this nation.
Right.
That's a pretty big scandal.
I mean, and that speaks to the system of bureaucracy destroying democracy.
Yeah, they're embedded everywhere, and what do? I mean, all you have to do to say that, oh, the judges, considered it and said no, check that box. That's all they have to do. You don't know if it actually happened. Yeah, I don't even know if the judges in the Ninth Circuit even considered my case because of exactly that. Is because clerks are intercepting it potentially. I'm
eager to see a lot of firings in the federal government and state
big
governments.
Investigations. Yep.
Investigations. I almost like on January 20th want to see 10,000 newly minted FBI agents march into the building and just start sealing off evidence.
Yep.
That 10,000. That's a good start.
Yeah, solid start.
Jason, thank you so much for this interview. Anything else you want to add?
Honestly, same sort of shameless plug and so forth. These fights are really, really, really tough, and they're really expensive, and we have virtually no support whatsoever. I mean, you just don't get it. Why? Because it's a war of attrition. They want to run you out of money. So, if you can go to socialmediafreedom.org and donate, I know I've got, and most people don't even know this. Do you know that you actually have to produce books, bound books, 400 of them, to go to the United States Supreme Court, right? Do you know how much it cost me last time I did that? $27,000, John. Just for the books. And that's not lawyers. That is just to produce the books so that you can give them the case because they work on paper. And it's like, well, that cost comes to me. So ultimately I have to pay for it. So socialmediafreedom.org can support some of that. If you donate, you'd be donating to essentially saving your own free speech, because that is what we need to do here. That's what we're fighting for, so that things like what happened with COVID and with all of this suppression doesn't happen again. We got to stop it.
Great. You can donate at socialmediafreedom.org on the screen. And you can follow Jason for more great work like this at Jason FYC on Twitter. FYK.
It's okay. FYK. Jason FYK on Twitter. And Twitter is the only one that I really don't do anything on anymore, because Facebook's a lost cause.
Yeah. So don't ignore everything I just said about the address. Jason FYK. Thank you, Jason. Have a wonderful day. And this is BrokenTruth.tv.